It's a good place to clap. 40 years in business in Nigeria and transitioning from one generation to another is a big deal. And we're here talking about how do we catalyze the Nigerian and Africa's blue economy. So I'm going to start by establishing a few facts. So of course we know already that Nigeria is a major maritime nation. I think it's number three in Africa. She has a coastline of 853 kilometers and over 300,000 square kilometers of exclusive economic zones. So my company operates within a zone. So some of what I'll be discussing today is from personal experience and not just research. So Nigeria's trade is maritime dominated. In Q4 2024, sea transport accounted for over 98% of exports and 90% of imports. So that obviously tells you how big, what the opportunity looks like, and Nigerians are not taking advantage of. Major investments, we've seen major investments take place in oil and gas industry. I mean, the last few days we've heard how much is going to be invested moving forward, projects that are coming on stream. Of course, Nigeria continues to remain crude oil export heavy. But how many Nigerians are playing in that space because those exports are going moving by sea? Africa's blue economy is, the World Bank says that by 2030, Africa's blue economy value will reach over $400 billion. How much of that is going to be retained? How much value will that be retained in the continent? And where does Nigeria fit in that sort of projection? 2030 is not far away. Here we're in 2026, talking about 4 years. How ready are we? What's our state of readiness to even participate? We have over 50 economic zones in Nigeria. 50. Maybe that's one of the things that has changed since my last presentation. And less than 25% of them are actually functional, like really functional, investor ready, poised for private sector to go in there and take advantage. Almost all of them are self-powered, but those of them that actually have power. So let's just look at this logic. We're trying to tie in energy, with maritime infrastructure, and then of course looking at the economy. So offshore projects lead to guaranteed cargo. So if we're drilling, exploring, producing, then of course certainly there's cargo to move. And if there's cargo to move, then there will be service demand because there's a value chain that has to support all of that operation. And of course with projects comes the need for ports, functional ports, modern ports, and logistics bases that actually function, that can take and accommodate the requirements of such projects. Those kinds of zones also attract investment because there's opportunity. And if you set up those zones, then of course you start to see jobs, you see value addition, and instead of exporting just the raw, you then have an incentive to set up processing facilities within those zones. And of course we know the recurring impact on GDP and etc. So what is the challenge? What is the issue? What is the problem? So first of all, I said already, opportunities drive private sector investment. So let's take Ladol as an example. I just want to have honest conversations. So when I present, I like to be factual, let's just be honest. Don't want to sugarcoat anything. Let's just say it as it is. And I apologize if I offend in advance. So let's take Ladol. One investment driven by opportunity. The Engineer project was massive. I mean, we saw Total Energies really ride that wave. NCDMB was just right there on the tail of that, celebrating how much local content was domiciled in Nigeria by virtue of the Engineer project. But in between the Engineer project and today, how many more big projects that have we seen? So take that you're Ladol management. You invested, build that capacity, try to feed that need, and then join time ended. And you're sitting with your capacity. You're looking at your capacity, and then nothing's happening with your capacity for ages. And you're waiting for the next big engineer to come along, and it's taking years, maybe almost 10 years. So there's no incentive. So we're seeing a direct correlation between offshore projects and how private sector reacts in terms of demand that is created and how we then begin to invest, whether speculatively, to be able to accommodate the demand that will come from projects. So if we're not drilling heavy drilling, if we're not working on projects, then private sector is really very cautious. And we're not seeing assets, real investment in assets. Secondly, the maritime sector is lacking capacity. I know that maybe NCDMP, when they do their presentation, they're going to show us how many tons are registered. We're having a conversation just now. But I work in the space. All my vessels are working. I still have demand. I can't find tons to even meet those demands. In the last 5 to 6 years, due to the first recession in 2016 and then COVID, which led to basically another recession, even globally, there was a glut in the manufacturing of vessels, building of vessels. So vessels have not been built in the last few years. Just beginning to see, and it takes anything between 24 to 36 months to build a boat. So you can imagine the age of the fleet that's existing, even for the ones that are available, and many more opportunities are ramping up around the world. So in Nigeria specifically, we have a deficit, and this is just offshore. Now I'm talking about cargo, just inland waterway movement. We don't have the assets that can do that. And the offshore energy projects require that support, moving pipes from Port Harcourt on air all the way to Lagos. They now have to truck. Imagine putting over 1,000 tons of pipes on the roads from Port Harcourt to Lagos. I don't know what's traveled by road from Benin to Port Harcourt in recent times. In the last 1 year, it's a horrible nightmare. And imagine putting 1,000 tons of pipes on such a road. That's because the opportunities on these waterways are not, they're not available, they're no assets. And then lastly, special economic zones are not, they're not giving what they're meant to give. They're not performing. I mean, for you to be a functional SCC, you must have reliable power. And working on there, we don't have power. We don't even have, yeah, NEPA has brought light, we don't have NEPA. We depend solely on generating sets. Everybody working in our air free zone is depending solely. I mean, I think the representative of the oil and gas free zone authority is here. Maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But as of yesterday, we're still using generating sets. Internal road networks, again, I work in an end. The main road is really lovely, very wide, very big. What about the connecting roads within water supply, wastewater treatment? How much commitment is being made to that? Without having these things, and then how do we connect your airports to the rest of the country through that one road? And I'm just using Mane as an example. So some of us are familiar with what's happening in the Papa ports. Even the Lekki deep sea port, which is supposed to be a big thing. It's not real. It's one way in, one way out. You can't even get to the Lekki deep sea port by ferry. Extremely dangerous. Tried and tested by the way. So the only way is either by chopper or by that one road leading in and out. So how does that work? How does that time? How do we really say that we want to key into $400 billion African economy if we haven't gotten these basic things right? So what are the opportunities? I mean, I'll just stick with three. One, the government is coming up. It's massive, it's big, it's a lot of demand, it's a lot of opportunity. But are we ready? Is the private sector ready? To be waiting now, that's what is happening. They were running around scrambling for the assets that are all over the world that are already booked. And how are they, I mean, how is Network supposed to manage that? And it requires a lot of marine logistics, it requires functioning logistics. Do we have that? Did Lado continue to invest? Did they build capacity, extra capacity to accommodate what Canada needs? I mean, people sitting in the room probably know the answer to that. Lekki Deep Sea Port is another opportunity, sitting in the zone. What's happening there? As long as we don't fix the major things that an SEC has to possess for it to function, we're just going to read about it, write about it, but are we really going to tap into the value that's missing that Lekki Deep Sea Port represents? Transshipment. I ordered a car, shipped it in from Dubai, supposed to come to Oman. The arrival date was, original arrival date to Oman was beginning of January. Then in December, we got a message, oh, it's now moved to 24th of January. 2 weeks ago, I got a message, oh, it's now moved to the 9th of February. As of today, it's moved to the 16th of February. And China is sitting in West Africa, in West African ports, but there's no barge, no transshipment vessel to bring it from where it's sitting to an air. So imagine all the goods that are sitting alongside my car that are supposed to be adding value to projects, to businesses here in Nigeria, sitting there simply because private sector hasn't seen the opportunity and decided, you know what, I'm not just going to be a supplier, middleman, company, I'm going to actually drill down and invest into hard assets, put my money, have some skin in the game, then going to look at the opportunity and actually one business. So yes, only God knows when I'm going to kind of get my car, and when all the other people who are waiting, I'm going to get the products coming from the university government with stock. And the last opportunity is the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement. I know it began to sound like a very nice, word after, just say after. Just like diversification, 6 years ago, diversification became like the coolest word. Everybody's lips, business diversification. What are you doing about that? That's how after. So that became. Don't even know if I say it correctly, you just know that it sounds, know what I mean, right? So it really represents a major opportunity when we're talking about Africa. It kind of changes the game for Nigeria, especially the economic zones. Takes us from Nigeria facing factories to Africa facing export platforms. It's supposed to force us to have a mindset shift to say, what can we do here? Not just trying to fulfill the requirements or the desires or the needs of the national market, but also looking at the continent. So a single African market represents about 1.4 billion people who are consuming on a daily. I mean, they have supermarkets. It's like blood money, literally, camel kind of blood money kind of thing. Simply because you're just meeting the daily needs of people. Imagine 1.4 billion people. What are they consuming? Can you produce? How can you service that market? And how can the SECs support? And how can maritime companies facilitate that trade? I see which one done, I'm almost done. So I want to just give you a picture of after. A tomato processor in Ogun, SEC, can sell to Ghana, Senegal, Cote d'Ivoire. A palm oil refinery in a coastal zone can supply North and Western Africa. An FMCG plant in Lekki can treat Africa as its own market, its consuming again. It's just getting us to think. It doesn't have to be one or two, the market is massive. So I'm just going to close because I see which one's standing. I want to speak to the SCCs. I want to lean first of all on the words of Dr. Philip, the Secretary of the Last Exporting Countries Forum, when he said, if your business outlook does not take into consideration the over 100 million Nigerians that are projected to be added to our population in the next 2 years, or the 1 billion Africans that will exist by 2050, they need to go back to the drawing board. Nothing big enough, reasonable enough, to really do business. So as we reflect on our words today, or as we reflect on all that has been said throughout the week, I'd like you to think about how big the market is and ask yourself, am I really doing business? Please exit it, and I know that I have OGX here, so I'll just speak to you when we're sitting. You need to close the infrastructure gaps. That's the only way that this conversation makes sense. We can't come back in 4 years, and I will not take this opportunity again to please don't, I will not speak of this topic again. If really all my research is saying we stand so still. We need to look at trade friction in those SECs. Are we really facilitating? We have 50 of them. Do we need 50? Are we able to, as governments and regulators and authorities, able to ensure that the SECs are meeting their fullest potentials? We are not meeting their fullest potential. For private sector, please let's move away from supply. Let's move to actually building business. Let's move to investing into actual assets, from shipyards to maritime vessels to terminals to logistics to ports. I mean, don't just look at the offshore energy market alone. The market is huge, it's humongous. I'm just giving you a few examples. Please let's start to invest and build. And then lastly, to the oil companies, drill, baby, drill, just so that we can support the rest of the value chain. Thank you very much.